Hey, Kratom quitters. This is the Kratom Sobriety Podcast. My name is Libby, and I'm here with my co-host, Jacob. How's it going, Jacob?
It's going all right. How are you?
I'm doing okay, all things considered.
Same.
I thought this week we could talk about hacks or mindset hacks that we use in our recovery, because I live in Los Angeles, and with the wildfires going on, I was kind of temporarily displaced from my house, and I was experiencing some cravings and thoughts, and I was like, oh, okay, great. Maybe this would be an opportunity to share what works for me when I'm really going through it. So one thing that came up, and this is something I learned so long ago, and a friend taught me this. She was like, I had a sponsor that every time I would be like, hey, I'm going to go pick up, the sponsor would be like, yeah, we can do that. Totally. Yeah, sure. I'm happy to do that. We can pick up tomorrow, but today we're working on step 4.
Yeah.
And I've really put that in my back pocket. So sometimes when I'm really going through it, I'm like, okay, sure. Yeah. Tomorrow I'll think about doing that. But right now I have other things to do. And that's just been so effective for me, because I think that riding the wave of a desire.
Yeah. Desire.
They go away.
Urges, cravings.
And the other one that really is helpful for me is playing the tape through. So that's something I learned in rehab many years ago, where it was okay, so let's say I go pick up an extract shot today. What does that look like for the rest of the day? I'm going to go to bed feeling good, and then wake up feeling a lot of guilt and shame, and then potentially go pick up again and, make excuses, and really seeing how that plays out through the rest of the week, and deciding none of that's worth it. You know what I mean? So really kind of seeing everything through to the end. Do you have any other helpful ways?
I do, yeah. But before I go to that, both of those are probably my top 2, to be honest, too. They're really good ones. I can't tell you how many times I did the tomorrow thing. Probably still do it sometimes. Let me see. Other things that I think are good hacks are, I like the people, places, and things. So particularly in early recovery, it's not a good idea, in my opinion, to go hang out at the Kava Kratom bar if that's where you were using, or go to the smoke shop if you're using nicotine or something and you're still frequenting there. Maybe go somewhere else just to change it up. The whole people, places, and things. Not as big of a thing with Kratom, because it's the anecdotal as well as the data we have from our guests, as well as just on the internet, that Kratom's not really a party drug. So it doesn't have that same kind of, when I was into drinking and doing party drugs, you go out and hang out with people typically in that environment. It's a little bit easier to kind of separate yourself. So that's a big one. I also like the sitting with feelings. It goes really well with, if you can't handle being sober for today, or for a lifetime or whatever, just all you have to do is focus on today. I find that taking yourself out of wherever you're having that craving, I remember distinctly in early Kratom sobriety, being at work and just having such a craving, and being in that building was just driving me nuts. So I literally just got up and went outside and sat down in a park bench in a large city that I was in, and 10 minutes later I was okay. I wasn't great, but I had got through the craving, and I wasn't about to divert my day and go relapse, which was a distinct possibility had I probably stayed in that building. So those are probably just 2 other ones that I think are good.
Yeah, I think that's a really good reminder. Someone told me that the half-life of a craving is 3 minutes or something. So if you can literally just sit with it, then it will pass.
Yeah. I really like the play the tape forward, though. I think that's my favorite one, just because I've done that so many times. It's been so helpful, particularly if you're a chronic relapser and you've done it a number of times. It's real easy to, maybe not easy because it's not what you want to think about, but if you put yourself in the right mind frame, it's easy to see exactly what's going to happen this time because you've done it before.
Yeah, I mean, it's really easy to be honest with yourself. This could go nowhere good.
Yeah.
Even if I have a moment of feeling good, I'm going to feel guilty and shameful and tempted and all the things again. So ultimately way easier to just sit through the uncomfortable feelings.
Yeah. I think that's important too, because anybody that has relapsed, I don't think I've ever met anybody that's been and the relapse was great, and it was just like the first time, and it satisfied everything I thought it was going to satisfy. And even though I'm back in the middle of addiction, it was worth it. I've never heard that story.
I've never heard that either, actually.
Because I don't think it's actually reality, because it's always not fun, and it never is as rewarding as you think it's going to be.
Well, that was really all I had planned for today. Anything else that you wanted to discuss?
No, I don't think so. I think we got an interview lined up and we'll let the guests go listen to that.
We have a human editor, James, who's a volunteer, and he hand edits the Sunday episodes, but we also use Descript, and that automatically identifies all the filler words, and we take a certain percentage out.
Oh, really? That's great.
I'm the worst. I'm a stutterer. I'm a mumbler, and I use a lot of filler words, but a certain number of filler words actually lets the conversation breathe, and people don't notice them unless it's really like a high volume. It's pretty weird. Your brain somehow just ignores them. Hello, everybody. This is Charlie, and this is the Kratom Sobriety Podcast. And the interview this week is with Eric. How's it going, Eric?
I'm doing well, Charlie. Thanks so much for having me on.
Please let the audience know who you are. We'd like just a little bit of background.
Okay, great. I am currently living in Vegas, the Vegas area. I've been here for 12 years. I grew up in the LA area in North Hollywood, moved to Northern California in high school, lived the Bay Area most of my life, Santa Cruz, San Jose, San Francisco. I met my wife in 2001, married in 2005, divorced in 2021 as a direct result of Kratom, which I'm sure I'll get into later. I had my daughter in 2009. She's 15 years old. She lives with me full time. And I have my own business teaching kids how to code. It's called Code Central, and it's a learning center teaching kids coding. I also teach. I'm a musician, not professionally, but for fun, recreationally. I've been doing that for years. And what else? I guess those are the main things. I'll probably share more as we go on, but that's a little bit intro for me. Probably a little bit older than some of the other people that you've had on your podcast. I'm over 50, so I might have a little different perspective than some of the younger people.
Yes, you're welcome. It appears that we're the same age around, and I have a daughter who is 15 as well, so we have that in common.
Yeah, definitely. It's a fun time, isn't it?
Yes, we're just counting the days now until she gets her driver's license. I'm actually cherishing every time I take her to school or back because there's only 60 more days of that.
Yeah, and does everything you do embarrass her? The way you talk,
yes.
breathe?
Yes, definitely. I actually, about a year ago, me and her had some difficult conversations about some conflicts we had, and I apologized and made amends, and then eventually I told her about this podcast. So now she is proud of the podcast and thinks I'm famous, and I'm not doing anything to like make her not think that's true.
No, that's great. My daughter's a huge part of the reason that I was finally able to quit. And I think one of the most things I'm most proud of my growth since quitting is that I'm such a better dad and parent to her now that I'm not on Kratom.
I'm a better listener, and especially when I was in my extreme use, I had a shorter fuse, and that's not the case anymore. And I'm just very grateful. When did you quit Kratom?
I quit Kratom 9 months ago. In fact, 9 months to the day today, which is interesting that you have me schedule me on the podcast for today because it's been exactly 9 months. And then I'm also hosting the Quitting Kratom meeting tonight. So it's definitely a good day to not be on Kratom any longer. I was on Kratom for 8 years before I was finally able to quit 9 months ago.
Tell about your introduction to Kratom, how that happened.
Yeah, probably like most people, it was completely innocently and unplanned and turned out to be unfortunate, of course. But it was 8 years ago. I had just moved to Vegas a few years ago, and I was an occasional cannabis user. I smoked a lot in high school and college and would smoke occasionally. And now that I was in Vegas, I didn't have a contact to buy cannabis from, and I wanted to smoke. And I had heard from someone that you could buy cannabis from the smoke shops here in Vegas. I stopped by, I could remember it so clearly. I smoked by a smoke shop on my way home from work, and I went in and I said, "Hey, do you guys by chance sell cannabis? And the guy there said, no, we don't. However, we have this stuff here that people really like and say that the high is kind of similar to cannabis. It's called Kratom. And that was my introduction to Kratom. So I bought some. The first time I took it, I felt really good. I loved how it made me feel. It wasn't very strong. And I started doing it occasionally, maybe once or twice a week. And I thought I had found this like wonder drug. It wasn't too strong. It wasn't affecting, or so I thought, my life. If I took a little bit, it would give me some energy. If I took a lot, it would help me relax and chill out, and it helped my mood and maybe more social. And it just really gives you that great feeling. And once or twice a week turned into 3 or 4 times a week, turned into almost every day, and then every day. And yeah, that was my introduction to Kratom. I took capsules and the powder. Fortunately, I never got hooked on the extracts because I feel for people now because it's so much stronger. But yeah, that was, and I did my research. I've never had addiction problems in the past. So I did my research, and it's a natural supplement, and it's an herbal thing, and it's grown from a tea leaf. And like all the research that I did convinced me that it was okay for me to take. And then, yes, they would asterisk it at some point with it can be addictive. But I wrote that off because as I said, I didn't have an issue with addiction. But so for the 8 years, I'd say 5 or 6 of those years, I didn't even think much about it. Right. And it wasn't until the end and things started changing that I realized the impact that it was having.
When you initially took it, what did you think about that comparison to cannabis?
I don't think it was cannabis. For me, it felt similar to Vicodin or Percocet. I had surgery on my ankle 10 years ago, and they gave me Percocet for the first time, and I loved it. I was like, oh my God, this stuff is so great. I just love the way it made me feel. But I wasn't hooked on it. I ran out of my prescription and boom, I was good. And when I took the Kratom, that's what it reminded me of, only a much milder version. And like I said, I felt like it didn't affect me, that I could still function. And
yeah, that's a curious comparison because I'm more like you. I felt like it was more like a Vicodin with a little bit of a Adderall effect, but it had a little bit of a upper. And at first, definitely there was no negative side effects when I first started using. How many grams a day you were using, and how often were you using, and how that progressed over time, and what it was at the end?
yeah, so mine wasn't as excessive as some other people's stories that I've heard, because I thought I had it under control. So I was careful not to use too much. I would use capsules and I would keep track of them. With the powder, not so much. I would just do like a spoonful. So I don't know exactly how much I was using, but I would say maybe 10 to 20 grams a day. I would not do it all day. I would usually wait until I was done working to do it. I'd wait till 5 or 6 o'clock. And so I'd take it in the evening and into the night. So I wasn't taking it 24/7 like some people were. But what I did do that I think got me into trouble is I would take Kratom, and I have ADD. So I would take Adderall once or twice a week. I didn't like the side effects, so I wouldn't take it every day as prescribed. I had a prescription for it, but I would take it a few times a week during work. And then as the workday was, and I hated the side effects of Adderall and coming off of it and that irritability. And so I take some Kratom, and it was like the perfect remedy. It mellowed me out and eased coming off Adderall. And so now I have a Kratom high and I'm feeling really good. And then to enhance the Kratom high, I would drink a little bit. Not a huge drinker, but I'd have a couple glasses of wine or some whiskey, and I'd enhance the Kratom high with alcohol, right? So now I got alcohol in my system. When I drink, as I'm feeling better and better, sometimes I like to smoke cannabis. So I'd smoke some pot, right? And again, just small amounts of everything. So I justified it. Oh, it's okay. And then the night's wearing on, and now I'm not able to sleep. So I would take Valium, right? So now I've gone from Adderall, Kratom, alcohol, cannabis, Valium, 5 different substances. And in my head, it's all okay. And I'd go to sleep and I'd wake up. So I thought feeling fine the next day. And I wouldn't do that every day, but I do it 2 or 3 days a week. But I was doing the Kratom every day. As I said, I thought it was enhancing my life for a long time, giving me energy. I felt like I slept well when I took Kratom, altering my mood. When I realized it was a problem was two things. One, when I tried to stop, but couldn't. Actually, what I would do is I would stop, and I would stop for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe a month. And then I had myself convinced that I didn't have a problem with it. Oh, I can go 3 weeks without it. I can go a month without it. Oh, I'm good. I'm just going to take some. So then after the 30 days, I would take some. And then 3 days later, I take it again. And then the next thing you know, I'm doing it every day and 6 months have gone by. And then I'd go through that again. I probably did that, 25 times of trying to quit, stopping for a while, thinking I had it under control, and then starting again. And when I finally realized it was having an impact was I was hiding it from my wife. She knew about the Kratom, but she didn't know the extent that I was taking it. That was one of the problems. And then my life just, I don't know if falling apart is the right word, but my life was going in the wrong direction. And so that was when I knew I had a problem. And one of the things about Kratom that I didn't realize this till more towards the end is I've always been a pretty confident person. I always felt like I can handle myself in social situations and dealing with problems and challenges, whether it was personal or at work. As I said, I own my business, so I'd have things coming at me. And when I was on Kratom, I didn't have that confidence. Like I felt, I don't know what the right decision here is to make. And I don't know that I can handle this situation properly. And that was scary for me. And then, of course, I would use it to check out and disengage. And as I said, I started lying about it to my wife. And so that was when I realized stuff needs to stop.
Some of those like repeated attempts to quit and then returning to a substance, hiding your use or the amount of your use, and then the isolating yourself either physically or mentally or in all sorts of different ways are all like signs of an addiction. Did it all come to a head where you had a bad bottom and there was a white light moment, like I need to quit? Or was it more like a gradual, you finally just took what it took and it was time to quit?
No, I definitely had a moment. So rewinding a little bit further, three years ago, as I mentioned, I got divorced from my wife. And what happened is we'd been together for 20 years and I had myself convinced that I was no longer in love with her, right? I wasn't interested in having sex. We weren't intimate either physically or emotionally. I was detached. Of course, I didn't accredit it to Kratom whatsoever. It was just a relationship. And so as a result of that, we separated for a few months, and this was during COVID, and then we got back together and we were in therapy. I actually shared about my Kratom use both with my personal therapist and also a marriage counselor that we were seeing. And unfortunately, both of them just wrote it off. They didn't know much about it. They didn't know it was an issue. Obviously, I didn't disclose how often I was doing it. I said I was using it, but I never said I was using it every day. And one of the therapists looked it up online and said, oh, you shouldn't take it with antidepressants, but other than that, you should be okay. And of course, I wasn't taking antidepressants. I felt I didn't need them because I had Kratom, right? Kratom was my antidepressant. So anyway, we got divorced after we were together again, and I never felt any emotion from the divorce. It was just like, okay, great. What do I need to do? We were going to go through a mediator, and then she hired a lawyer. So I had to hire a lawyer, and then it got contentious with all the financial stuff and back and forth. But I was not feeling anything. And at the time, of course, I didn't realize it was because of the Kratom. And then also during that same time, my daughter was in the hospital. Her appendix burst, and she was in the hospital and had all kinds of complications. So she had her surgery. They took her appendix out. They had to go back in because they didn't get all the bacteria and infection out. They had to put a pump in her stomach to pump out fluids. It was just awful. She was there for 3.5 weeks. Then she had lost so much weight. They had problems putting an IV in her. She developed a blood clot. So for 3.5 weeks, my wife and I would alternate nights sleeping at the hospital. And it was really touch and go for a while there. I was scared we were going to lose her. And I was still taking Kratom. I take them. I bring capsules with me when I was at the hospital. And then also my sister died from cancer around this time, a little bit earlier. And I helped take care of some of the stuff for her service. And we were super close. She was a year and a half older than me. We were very close growing up and as adults as well. And same thing, I never felt sadness, right? But anyway, getting back to when I finally decided to quit was 9 months ago. My daughter's about to start high school, went to an orientation for her new high school. I had stopped taking Kratom for, again, about 3 weeks or a month. Felt I was okay, I was good. So I took it a little bit before going to this event. And Charlie, I got to tell you, I don't know if I would call it my rock bottom, but it was definitely a really low point for me, just in how I felt about myself. I didn't have any confidence. I felt like a shell of myself. I was disgusted with myself. I was avoiding talking to people. There was a lot of parents there that I knew from my business whose kids came, and parents of friends of my daughter, friends of my ex-wife were there. There's all these people, and I just wanted to hide. I didn't want to socialize. I didn't want to talk to people. I was embarrassed. My business was struggling. I was on the verge of losing my business. We were talking, I have two partners. We were talking about shutting it down. And I didn't even have the will to turn things around. And as you mentioned earlier about being irritable, that whole Kratom rage and losing my temper. And I didn't lose it at that point, but I got really irritated with my daughter and just did not feel good about myself. Like I said, I was disgusted with who I had become. And that was when I finally decided, that's it, I got to quit. And that was the last time I used. And that was 9 months ago.
Congratulations. I can relate to all that.
Yeah, thank you. It was in quitting, one of the things that they say is play the tape forward when you want to use. What's it going to look like? How are you going to feel to stop you from using again, which is a great, valuable tool. For me, I play the tape backwards. I go back to that moment of being at that school orientation and how I felt and how awful I felt about myself. And that keeps me from using as a reminder.
And you are one of those types of people. It looks like you have been able to quit multiple times. I think you used the number 20, but do you just cold turkey? Do you taper?
So I tapered. I know a lot of people can't taper. A lot of people go cold turkey. But even when I did try to quit those 20 times, it was always tapering. And I would have my capsules and I would count them out. And I'd plan them out so that I would run out on a particular day when I got to 2 capsules. And each day I would take 1 less, which actually was very effective because although I went through withdrawals and I did have a hard time with the emotional part of it, the physical part of the withdrawal was not as bad for me. And I think that was because of the tapering. But yeah, I use a taper method, worked for me. It doesn't work for everybody, but that was how I was finally able to get off of it.
All right. And how did the first 30 days go?
Oh my God. First 30 days it's probably the worst month of my life. I didn't know what to expect, right? I didn't know anybody who was on Kratom. I didn't know anything about the withdrawal systems and your dopamine and opioid receptors and all the supplements that you can take to help and what to expect and anhedonia and having your feelings slowly come back. I didn't know any of that. I was just shooting in the dark for the first 60 days. So those first 30 days, as I said, I was on the verge of losing my business. I was depressed. I had suicidal thoughts for the first time in my life. I've never had them before, but I did have them at that time. I just felt this incredible despair and hopelessness. And as I said, I had no one to talk to about. I didn't know that what I was going through was pretty normal for coming off of Kratom. And I've always thought of myself as a pretty resilient person. When I've been down, I've been able to get back on my feet and say, okay, what do I got to do now? And I remember sitting on the floor in my room thinking, I got to change. This is not working, right? My life is not turning out. I don't know if I have it in me to turn it around. Like I actually had that thought for the first time in my life. I don't know if I can do this. And that's where the suicidal thoughts came in and the despair. And had it not been for my daughter, I don't know what would have happened. But when I had those thoughts, it was like, okay, I got to do this for her. I got to do it for me, of course, but I need to do it for her because she needs a dad. She needs a dad who is not addicted to this drug.
And those mental side effects, just the despondency and the doom that seems to be like permanent in an early quit are bad enough. Did you have any like physical withdrawals?
I had restless legs. I had trouble sleeping, super irritable, wanted to get out of my skin. Those were the biggest things. And fortunately, I was doing some things that I didn't know I should do to help, but I happened to be do them anyway, which was working out. I was going to the gym pretty regularly. I was taking ice baths and cold showers, had been part of my routine for a few years. And I usually eat pretty clean. So I was doing all those things to help with the physical aspect of it. Again, not knowing that's what you're supposed to do. So I was fortunate in that area.
If I understand right, did you have a DUI that was involving Kratom?
Oh man, that's such an embarrassing story. Yeah, right after I had moved out of the house with my ex-wife, I had a new apartment. I had moved out the day before, hadn't slept much that night, and was going to be sleeping at my apartment for the first time. I went out to dinner with a group of friends and took Kratom a couple hours before I went, or maybe an hour before I went. I don't know. Dosed with the Kratom, went to the restaurant, had dinner. I had one beer. Right. I'm not a big drinker, but I had one beer and I'm getting ready. We're driving home. Right. And I'm feeling good. I'm not feeling drunk or impaired, at least in my head, but I did have Kratom in my system and I had the alcohol and I was making the turn to get on the freeway. And of course, it's my first time going home to a new place. And I realized I was entering the freeway the wrong way. So I hung a quick U-turn to turn around, not realizing it was a one-way street, and there I was sitting the wrong way, my car going the wrong way on a one-way freeway entrance right off of Las Vegas Boulevard, and there was a cop right there. There I am. He pulls me over, asked me if I've been drinking. Obviously, like an idiot, I said, yes, I had one drink. I should have said no, but I got super nervous. And like I said earlier about not having that confidence, I was scared. My heart was beating. I'm like, just don't say anything. Anyway, long story short, field sobriety test takes me out of the car. I'm not able to walk a straight line very well. I'm probably slurring my words. Next thing I know, they're throwing handcuffs on me and putting me in the police car. And they're taking me to Metro jail, jail, downtown Vegas, right? The worst part. I live in Henderson, which is a suburb outside of Vegas, a little bit nicer, but where I was, they took me there. I ended up spending a night in jail. And you would think that would have been enough to get me to quit because I was like, what am I doing here? I don't belong here. There was all these drug addicts there and sex workers. And I talked to this one guy. He said, they brought me in for parole. I'm on parole for murdering somebody. And here I am, right? Middle-aged man. I own a business. I have a family. I'm like, what the fuck am I doing here? I tried calling my ex-wife to get me out, but they wouldn't let me use my cell phone. So I had to use the payphone. And it was like midnight and she saw this strange number. So she didn't answer it. So I called 3-4 times. She never answered it. So again, I ended up spending a night in jail as a result of Kratom. So what ended up happening, I had to hire a lawyer and my blood alcohol level was super low. It was like 0.03 or something. Obviously, it was the Kratom that impaired me. So it got reduced to a reckless driving.
I had one experience where I was pulled over when I was using Kratom. It was late at night, like 10 o'clock. And I guess I crossed the medium on a main street in a town, pulled me over. And he asked me if I had been drinking. I said no. He let me off with a warning, but I had done a bunch of Kratom shots that day and I was probably swerving. Your story, it just reminds me life is so much better without Kratom because you don't end up spending the night in jail and you don't end up puking because you just took too much Kratom.
Yes, that's so true.
So this question's a little facetious, but I'm just imagining like a pro Kratom person who happens to listen to our podcast and they come in to hear your story and they hear you were taking Adderall, you were taking Kratom, cannabis, drinking beer, and Valium at night, 5 different substances. Why are you blaming Kratom for all your problems?
No, that's a great question. And like I said, when I was first taking Kratom, I thought I found this miracle drug. It helped my mood. It helped me with everything and I could still function. What I realized was I was not, I was just so disengaged from people, especially my wife. And again, it had me convinced that I wasn't in love with her anymore. This is the love of my life. And we've been together for 20 years. And I'm like basically pissed it away. And it wasn't until after I got off Kratom that I realized, and I can talk about that in a little bit, but to have anything have that kind of control over you, that you can't stop it and you can't say no and you need it and you got to plan ahead for it. And every time I would travel, I would make sure I would have some, and I would take it. I would dose an hour before the plane took off so that I was feeling great during the flight, and I would make sure that I had enough to cover my trip. And I just became so self-centered. It was just all about me, and it was all about taking Kratom and feeling better. My relationships hurt from it. I was hiding from everybody. As I said, nobody knew about it. And it wasn't until I found this community about 2 months after I quit that I could actually talk to people that knew exactly what I was going through. It had a huge impact on me. I took it for 8 years, right?
Yeah.
8 years of thinking I'm functioning fine. And as I said, I almost lost my business. I lost my marriage. I was not being the greatest father. I was not feeling good about myself, right? And I would just turn to the Kratom. And so I think that's the biggest thing about it, is the disengagement and not realizing it. Again, it wasn't until after I quit that I was able to realize the impact that it had on me.
And during that period, if I understand right, Kratom was the one that you did every day. That was the one you were dependent on.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, the other substances I would just do occasionally, but yeah, the Kratom was daily, and 8 years is a long time.
This is a good segue. Just what is your decision on your relationship with those other drugs? At the podcast, we're pretty neutral. We believe in Kratom abstinence, and then let each quitter make it their own decision about those other substances. Many of us decide we need to be clean from everything, but other people have different approaches. So where are you?
Yeah, that's a great question. The Adderall and the Valium, I stopped about a month or two before I quit the Kratom. I had, obviously, before I hit that rock bottom point, I realized my life was not going where I wanted it to. So I'm looking at, okay, what do I need to do? About 2 months before I quit Kratom, I stopped the Adderall and the Valium. And then a month after I quit Kratom, I quit cannabis. So I've been off of cannabis for 8 months, been off of the Adderall and Valium for maybe close to a year, and then 9 months on the Kratom. And it just feels really good to be clean. I'll drink occasionally in social situations. I'll have a glass of wine or two, maybe once or twice a week. Sometimes I'll go a couple months without drinking. So I feel like I'm getting back to my old self again. And it took a while. It was a progression. Those first 60 days were pretty awful, for sure. And one thing that's been super helpful for me when I do have those cravings or those urges for Kratom, and they've definitely decreased, but they're still there, I pause and ask myself, okay, why am I wanting to take it? Is there a feeling or emotion that I'm trying to avoid? Is it a mood change that I'm wanting? And when I'm able to catch myself and pause, I'm like, okay, I'm going to do something else. I'm going to go exercise, or I'm going to call a friend, or I'm going to listen to some music, or I'm going to do something that serves me rather than take Kratom.
Excellent. I imagine being off the Kratom and these other substances, you finally experience the grief of your divorce and the loss of your sister.
Yeah. So about 2 months after I quit, I found the Quitting Kratom community, which was such a blessing. Because I was struggling so much, I was actually looking into doing a rehab. I went to some NA meetings and AA meetings, and although they were helpful in looking at my addiction, I didn't feel like those were the right places for me, because I feel like the Kratom addiction is a little bit different, although it's similar in many ways. And so in researching these rehab places, I found an online Kratom recovery, or I don't remember what it was called, meeting through Mountainside, which you're probably familiar with.
Yes, on Tuesday nights.
Yeah, Tuesday nights. And I'm like, oh, and that was the only thing I could find. I couldn't find anything else online. And I found that, and I attended a meeting, and I remember Jana. Is it Jana or Yana? Jana.
Jana.
And Jana and Ian that host it. And I don't know if I shared the first time or not. I might have, but I got so much out of it. I'm like, wow, these people are going through what I went through and they understand. And from there, I found out about the other meetings, the Quitting Kratom or There's a Way Out. And so the next day I attended one of those. I remember Hillary was the host. Hillary, I love her so much. And Decima, she's just amazing, all that she does for the community. And anyway, I started attending meetings. And now I forgot what your question was. Go down
Grieving
the road.
the loss of your
the
marriage.
grieving. Yes. Yeah. Okay. I attended a few meetings for about a week and started realizing what I was going through, and my emotions started coming back. So I'm going to rewind a little bit. Soon after I had my first date with my wife, like less than a month afterwards, I was doing a silent retreat up in Big Sur, and I was meditating, and just out of nowhere, I had this vision of my wife in a white wedding dress. And it just had a huge impact on me. I got all emotional. And I was like, wow, what was that? And I didn't say anything to anybody. But in my head, I was like, I think I'm going to marry this woman, right? 4 years later, we got married. So fast forward, the same time period where I found the meetings, I was meditating again. And I had this incredible, like visceral feeling of, oh my God, what have I done? I lost my marriage, my house, my family. I thought I wasn't in love with her anymore. I still love her. Oh my God, this is a bad dream. Can I just wake up? What have I done? And that hurt. That really hurt me to realize the pain that I had caused to her, the impact that it had on her. And as your feelings start slowly coming back, so now I'm feeling the sadness. I'm feeling the loss that I didn't feel for 3 years, right? And soon after that, I called her up because I wanted to come clean with her about my addiction. And it was a really emotional phone call because for her, it was, I don't know what the word was, like not reassuring, but reaffirming the feeling that she had because she thought that it was the Kratom, but I had never admitted to it. And I can remember a handful of times when we were going through tough times, like I really wanted to come clean to her when we were still together. I wanted to tell her that I was addicted, and I would come like this close to it and I would get stopped. I don't know if it was my pride or guilt or shame or what. I'd be like, no, I can handle this on myself. And I didn't share with her. During that phone call, I'm so glad that you're telling me because now it makes sense. And I was like, oh, I can't believe I've done this. And I feel so guilty and remorse. And she said something. She said, not all great love stories have a happy ending. And ours was a great love story. And ever since that phone call, our relationship has just transformed. We can't go back, of course, but our friendship is there again. Our love for each other. We're great co-parents. She's been super supportive. She knows about the meetings. She knows I'm hosting them. I share with her when I hit the 6 months and the 8 months and the 9 months. And we have a great relationship again.
That's wonderful. I imagine it's a real gift to her too. Co-parenting can be challenging, so I'm glad. And yeah, a couple of shout outs just for the audience. If you're struggling, I highly recommend the Tuesday night meeting with Mountainside. And it's nice because it's one of the only places I'm aware of where there's a professional kind of involved. And Janet Wu is great. And then There Is a Way Out, the kratomquitters.com. They have meetings 7 days a week, usually twice a day, including on Saturday nights. You host on Saturday nights, Eric. And yeah, Hillary, she was on our podcast, I think episode 65. It's nice that there's a community too. Kratom addiction is weird because it's very invisible. People don't know about it, the general public. And then when you're trying to quit, until recently, it was a very isolating thing. You didn't do it with other people. It was a solo adventure. And now you don't have to do it alone. And then second, I'm a big fan of the 12 steps or smart recovery or NA or refugee recovery. There's lots of other recovery communities, and not to make us feel special, but I do think it's isolating going to those communities as a Kratom addict. They can't relate. Kratom isn't exactly like alcoholism. It's really nice to have the Kratom specific recovery space. I usually recommend people try to have a foot in both worlds, go to a general recovery community, and then also be in a Kratom specific recovery community and take the best of both. Everybody's different.
That's so right on. Isolating. I felt so isolated in my Kratom use and trying to quit. And for those first 2 months until I found this community, and it's made such a difference to attend the meetings. And there's a Signal chat that is hard to keep up with because there's so much action, but you got people that have been off for a year or two. You don't have the AA 10 years, 20 years because Kratom's a little bit newer. And then, but you have people that have some time behind them. And then you have all these people that are in the midst of it and they're trying to quit, or they've quit and they're relapsed, or they've got 30 days or 60 days. And it's just an amazing community, a group of addicts, people that have had issues with alcohol, heroin, meth, cocaine, people with anxiety, depression, eating disorders, bipolar, ADHD, traumas of all kinds, this fucked up group of misfits. But we all have this one thing in common that we can all relate to, that for many of us, other people in our lives cannot relate to. You said there's so many people that are pro-Kratom and people that don't know anything about Kratom. And yet all these different people can come together with honesty and support and love and no judgment. People relapse, they feel guilty, they feel shame. People are on the chat or in the meeting saying, hey, just get back and do it again. You know, we know how hard it is. And all these people that can relate to what you're going through. And that's been huge for me.
How are things just overall in your life at 9 months? Just what are all the good things that are happening now that you're off of Kratom?
So the good things are I turned my business around. As I said, we were on the verge of shutting it down, and now we've turned it around, and we're looking at growing again. I mentioned about the relationship with my ex-wife. It's a very loving, supportive relationship, even though we're not together anymore. My relationship with my daughter is so much deeper. You were talking earlier about listening. I listen so much better, and I'm supportive and loving and affectionate, and I'm there, right? I'm not just there physically, I'm there emotionally as well, where for a long time I wasn't. I started teaching again, which I had done when I was in San Francisco, and now I'm teaching again, and I love teaching, and I love the kids, and I love going to work and being around the other teachers and administrators and the kids, and complete opposite of the isolation I was feeling when I was on Kratom, and I would, be spending days to myself. I mentioned earlier I'm a musician. The love and power of music has come back. Where on Kratom it was dulled, and my relationships I've shared with my brother and my sister and a handful of friends about my Kratom use. And again, a lot of them don't quite understand, but I feel like I'm honest. I'm not hiding anymore. I have more energy. I'm sleeping well. And then also I have all these great relationships with these people in the community that we've never met. And yet there's so much love for each other. In fact, I met two of them, Kelly and Christina. I'll give them a shout out. I met them through the group and they came to visit in Vegas, and I spent an afternoon with them. And it was just amazing. These people that you know only through virtually, and then you meet them in person, and we felt like we were old friends. And so that's a great thing to have that and to have those relationships. I love hosting the meetings. I love being able to give back. Hopefully sharing my story can help other people. And yeah, life is good. I still have a lot of guilt and remorse about what happened with my divorce, but I know that I can't go back, and I can just keep moving forward and being a better person every day.
So speaking of music, what is on your playlist, or what are some of your inspirations for the music you play?
The music we play, I have a group of guys. We have a jam session every Monday night, and we have families and businesses. One guy's a doctor and kids, and Monday night is our chance to just play music and indulge. We do a lot of 70s covers, 80s covers. We do Led Zeppelin. We do some blues stuff, Leonard Skinner. We do Beatles, Rolling Stones, The Who, just a little bit of everything. We just throw songs out there. Myself, I love all kinds of music, mainly rock. Queen is one of my all-time favorite bands. I'm a huge Beatles fanatic. Led Zeppelin, early Van Halen, I'm a big fan of. And I get turned on to more modern music as well. with my daughter, even though we don't have the same taste. So I'm all over the place with music.
Let's see. You're going to give yourself a message from a year from now to yourself. What would that be?
A message to myself a year from now. I know I've been asked the question, your younger self, what would you tell them?
Yeah.
But a year from now, what would I tell myself? I would tell myself that true fulfillment is when you are contributing to other people. Like getting back to the Kratom, I kept looking for fulfillment, a high, enjoyment, whatever for myself. And it was all about me. And now I realize it's in service to other people and providing something for them that true fulfillment is. So I would say a year from now, I'm hoping that I'll have done a lot more for other people than I have done while I was on Kratom, and that there's just so much to be grateful for. That's another thing that I've really gotten out of being clean, is just a gratitude for the life that I have.
Couple more questions. We don't have many folks that have successfully tapered. So do you have any tapering advice from your experience over your many quits?
Tapering advice. I would just say that the advantage of tapering is, and I don't know if this is for everybody, but I think it reduces some of the physical withdrawals because you're slowly getting off of it and weaning yourself off of it. I think if you're scared of the physical withdrawals, that Kratom or that tapering might be a good solution for you. And again, what worked for me is I would just count the pills, and I would count them until there was none left. And I would slowly work my way down, and I would just do one capsule less a day. Of course, I can't tell you how many times I would go out again and buy more, right? But that worked for me to finally do it, was to just slowly decreasing and measuring it. If you're doing extracts or you're doing the powder, it may not be so easy to reduce what you're taking on a day-by-day basis, where if you're doing the capsules, you can count them out. So I guess that would be my advice. And then, of course, just getting back to what we've talked about before, is reaching out to people, not keeping it a secret, sharing with people, especially your partner. If you have a wife or husband or a boyfriend or girlfriend or whoever, don't hide it from them. Because I learned the hard way that being secretive about it is not the way to go.
And something you mentioned there, even pre-quitting, if you start recording how much you're using for a month, and it will stop making Kratom use a secret to yourself. You'll stop hiding it from yourself, and just that documentation of it will change your relationship with what you think about Kratom by measuring it. And you can then use that information to maybe plan a taper.
If you're trying to quit and you're struggling, or you're slipping, or you're relapsing, or you don't know where to turn, or you're feeling you're beating yourself up, which I think a lot of us do, is to have compassion for yourself. Quitting Kratom is not an easy thing. I hear people talk about it was easier for them to get off of heroin than it was quitting Kratom. And I've never taken heroin, so I don't know. But this stuff is just evil. Insidious is a word that a lot of people use because you don't realize the impact that it's having and how addicting it is. Have some compassion for yourself. Love yourself. There's a great book I want to throw out there that I discovered. It's called Love Yourself as If Your Life Depended on It. The author's name is Kamal Ravikant. You can look it up. And it's a little book. It's a quick read, but it's really all about loving yourself and having compassion for yourself, as opposed to beating yourself up and focusing on what's wrong with you and your shortcomings. So I highly recommend that book. And that kind of ties into that self-compassion, that it's tough to get through, but know that once you get through it, things start coming back. My mental capacity is coming back. My emotional capacity has come back. And again, I'm rambling a little bit, but just keep at it. If you slip, if you relapse, do it again and reach out to people. I know I've said that many times, but having this community, having the meetings. And by the way, I don't know if I said this before, but we now just started a later meeting for West Coast people. That's 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern on Tuesday nights that Allie and I are hosting. So West Coast people. I know a lot of people can't make the 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 Pacific meetings. So now we have a later once a week, and hopefully we'll have them more often. Come to a meeting, check it out. It's a great group of people. It's very supportive. They're all over the place as far as where they are in their quit. But to have people that can listen to you and get where you're at and be loving and supportive without judgment is just such a gift.
Excellent. I will put in the show notes a link to that book. I have never heard of it, and I'll check it out myself. And thanks for sharing that. And when I sent the new Kratom meeting schedule to Janet just last week, and her remark was like, wow, Tuesdays, there's 4 meetings now. You got the noon meeting for women, the Mountainside meeting at 7:00, the traditional There Is a Way Out meeting at 8 p.m. Eastern, and then now your new 10:00 Eastern, 7:00 Pacific meeting. So it's amazing how much that we have 4 Kratom meetings in one day now.
That's awesome. And Charlie, I just want to say thank you for all that you do, because I know we were talking right before we started recording that I can't tell you how many people that come to our meetings for the first time mention that they heard about us from your podcast, and that the podcast was the first place they found someone that they could relate to as far as what they're going through. And I know you're doing more and more of these podcasts all the time. So I just really want to thank you so much for all that you do.
It ties to what your message you sent to yourself for a year ahead. I want to contribute back and not be a servant to the Kratom, be a servant to somebody greater than myself. And that was the main purpose. If we have a mission statement, is to make Kratom quitting less isolating. But I'm grateful for you as a fellow Gen Xer. A lot of times when I do go to a meeting, or a lot of our guests, they tend to be 90% younger than me.
Yeah. Same here. I guess we're some of the elders in the Kratom community, but there are some regulars in the meeting that are our age or older.
Well, thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you, Charlie. Appreciate it. Thank you for having me on. And fuck Kratom.